Andy Nairn has led a charmed life. He stumbled into advertising after studying law at Edinburgh University. Almost 30 years later, he's one of the world's most respected brand strategists and the founder of one of the UK's most successful creative agencies. Lucky Generals has been shortlisted for Campaign Magazine's Agency of the Year for 5 years in a row, and Andy has been named the country's top strategist for the last 3 in a row. He's also been named one of the top 5 creative people in the world by Business Insider. Hello and welcome to Talk Business with Andy.
Hello, and thank you very much for having me on the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Andy. So let's go back to the beginning. How did you get into the world of advertising?
Oh, I completely stumbled into it, if I'm honest. I did law at university and had no great interest or desire to get into advertising, but I really enjoyed law, and I liked sort of assembling all the facts and putting together a case for a client, I suppose. But I knew I didn't really want to do something which felt a bit corporate like law, so I sort of had a word with one of my tutors, and he sort of said, well, if you like that kind of bit about law but you don't like the other bit, how about thinking about something like advertising? So it was just a good bit of careers advice, really. And that's what happened.
So what happened then in between you deciding to get into advertising and then founding this awesome creative agency, Lucky Generals? How did that all come about?
Well, as usual, lots of twists and turns, but basically I got in the door to a very big agency, a place called Abbott Mead Vickers, which is one of the top agencies. In fact, it wasn't then, but it is sort of now more or less one of the biggest, or perhaps even the biggest for the last 20 years. And then, so that was a really good beginning, because it was like a big and classic and very good training and all those sort of structures. And then worked at another couple of agencies who were very good over here. Went to the States for a couple of years. And then I came back from San Francisco where I'd been working and met a real friend who I've worked with ever since, a lady called Helen Calcraft, who's a great business partner of mine. We've worked together solidly for 20 years, and we also sort of along the way picked up another friend who is now the third person in the company, sort of thing, in Lucky Generals. So it's really when we set up Lucky Generals, which is 7 years ago, it was the three of us, all good friends. We'd been working together, as I say, at this previous agency, and having quite a lot of success. And then we thought, we can do this ourselves. We can have our own shot at it, and luckily that's turned out to be the case.
Yeah, we mentioned at the top when we was introducing you guys have got an absolutely amazing reputation. What are some of the key milestones for Lucky Generals that have brought you to where you guys are today?
Well, I think just starting up in the first place is quite a big deal, because a lot of people have a desire to do a startup or to start a business with their friends or colleagues or whatever, and they don't get all the planets to align, because you've got to want to do it and have the time and the family commitments and all the rest of it to do it. And then your partners have also got to be in the same boat all at the same time. So that was quite a big bit of luck, I suppose. And then, getting started without, and we didn't have any clients. So we deliberately set up without having sort of a big backer or any sort of wealthy sort of support or anything like that, because we wanted to just sort of force ourselves to sort of be quite pure at the beginning. And we started working with Paddy Power early on, which were great because they were crazy, allowed us to do all sorts of mad sort of quite creative things. So that was a big moment. And then really, every single client we've won has been a big one, to some degree or other. Winning Yorkshire Tea was fantastic. Winning Co-op was a biggie because they're huge sort of, obviously massive supermarkets. So that was something different. And then, of course, Amazon was an absolute whopper to win when we were only about a year old. So it's been a real roller coaster, and of course there's been some lows on the way as well.
Yeah, amazing. So many people would love to work with a company like Amazon. Just for anyone listening, we have lots of entrepreneurs and business owners listening that would like to reverse engineer these things. How did you guys manage to secure a deal with Amazon, and what does that process actually look like, Andy?
So they approached us, as I say, when we were about a year old. They hadn't really done a huge amount of advertising. It sounds ridiculous, but until then they hadn't really, invested in advertising before. They just grown naturally, and then they decided that they wanted their own first UK ad agency. And we were like pretty gobsmacked actually when we got a call, because we were only like about 20 people at the time, maybe even a bit less than that. And we thought, why has this enormous company come looking for somebody like us? And it turned out it was a really good bit of luck again, because one of the principles, one of the many really interesting bits about their culture is they don't like really big teams. Although they're a huge company, the individual teams within Amazon, they've got this thing called the 2 pizza rule, which is if your team can't be fed on 2 standard pizzas, then the team's too big, so you should lose some people. So actually, they saw our tiny little size as a real advantage. They didn't want to work with a big ad agency or like a big network with offices all over the world and, you know, Madison Avenue and stuff like that. They really liked the idea of working with, you know, a little entrepreneurial startup. So that actually worked in our favor. And, you know, you do a pitch, like I'm sure lots of your listeners will, or watchers will sort of be familiar with. They gave us, you know, a month or so, set us a little sort of an exam question, you know, a brief that said, you know, what would you do with, I can't remember what product it was at the time. I think maybe like Fire Stick TV or something like that. And what would you do with this? And you have a go at it, and it's obviously not perfect because you've not really been doing it with all the data that you would get if you were really working with them in practice, but you have your best go and give them enough to see whether, you know, what's your thinking like and what is your creative quality like. And they seem to like what they saw, and it's been just a fantastic obviously partnership ever since.
Can you remember where you were when that email come through saying that you were hired?
Do you know, they did it really nicely, because they did it at the beginning of the final meeting, and they said, you've more or less got this, just so as long as you don't mess this meeting up, you're sort of in the clear. And so then we spent the whole of the meeting sort of worrying that we were going to say the wrong thing, and you know it was like a no-win situation, other than, you know, we managed to get through unscathed. But I thought it was really nice that they did, you know, again, a big company that can still, you know, they realised how important it was, so they didn't just tell us by email or, you know, voicemail. So
yeah, that's nice. It's funny knowing what this topic that we're going to be speaking about today. I've already heard you use the language luck a couple of times, even before coming to this point. Lucky Generals, your new book, Go Luck Yourself. I can see a theme here. What are your thoughts on luck, and how has this become something of interest to you?
Well, yeah, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because it is a natural thing. I wasn't doing that in a fake way, I don't think. And if anything, we set up Lucky Generals, as I say, 7 years ago. And basically, we just liked the name, if I'm honest. It's a Napoleon quote. And somebody asked him, what do you look for in your officers? And he said, I just bring your lucky generals. You know, in other words, people who have got a good track record of getting results and, you know, actually make things happen. And so at the time, we didn't think about it more than that. We just thought, oh, that's quite a cool name. Let's call ourselves Lucky Generals. But then last year, a little bit like you did there, I started thinking, God, so much of our careers have been actually based on lucky breaks, like winning Amazon or, you know, some of these other things. And I sort of thought, well, this is ridiculous. I've got a company called Lucky Generals, but I don't even understand what luck is or how it works or anything like that. So I thought I'd do a bit of research into it, and I just found it really fascinating. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that all of us probably enjoy a bit of luck from time to time. I'm sure every entrepreneur listening to this will know that they've either experienced good luck or bad luck. And I think really crucially, we can, if you're conscious of it, you can actually change and improve your luck. So actually, maybe we should think about it more often, because then we might be able to sort of stack the odds in our favor a wee bit.
Yeah, brilliant. It's funny, isn't it? A lot of people listening, and myself as well, when I knew that we were going to be doing this interview, recognized, and I sort of evaluated my relationship with luck. Definitely recognize luck when I've had bad luck, and I like to blame things. Had a bit of bad luck. When something goes well, not so much putting that down to good luck, right, or because I'm really awesome, Andy, right?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's exactly it. If I were to say that you were lucky, you'd probably be quite insulted. Sort of thing. You know, it's a bad thing in our society. It's like at the best, it's a taboo that we don't like to talk about, and at worst, it's a bit of an insult. But if we're being really honest, even a lot of the good things, yes. And I think the problem is that we've set up this false analysis, which means that they're seen as it's like almost like the opposite of hard work and the opposite of talent and imagination and all the rest of it. You know, so if I were to say that you're lucky, you might think, oh, well, you're having a go at me. But actually, I feel like you can be both. You can be lucky, but then it still requires it still requires hard work and, you know, business smarts and entrepreneurialism to seize the opportunity and make something of it, you know. So they can be sort of happy bed fellows rather than sort of enemies.
Yeah, sure. I think as well, we you would have heard this so many times as well, Andy. Definitely, as it's on your radar. People categorise themselves, don't they, as either being a lucky person or an unlucky person. I was born lucky or I was born unlucky. Tell us about that. And do people make their own luck?
Well, I certainly think there's different sorts of luck, and to some degree, I think you can be born lucky and you can make your own luck. And so, obviously, you could be born lucky because, like, some things just happen to you, regardless of your what you've done. Like, you can, if you're born into a really wealthy family or in a really wealthy part of the world, or I guess if you get your first job at a very big and successful company, that is, that might be lucky and not very much due to your own sort of skills. But then over and above that, you can make the most of the luck that you have been given. So I guess it's a bit like cards, isn't it? You can't do much about the cards that you're given, but once you've got them, you can make the best hand of the cards that you've been dealt with, if you like, sort of thing. So there's two separate. You might get given a terrible hand of cards, and then you're probably not going to be as likely to win as the other person, but you can make the most of them. And I think that's what all of us and companies can do, is take the cards that they've been given and play them to the best of their abilities. And
that's very much what your new book's about, right?
That's what it's about. Yeah, I mean, there's certain things that you can't. If your company's has certain problems that you've just inherited, then I think it's helpful to sort of know about that and to be sort of mindful of it. Because the more sort of conscious you are about luck, I think the more you're able to change it, sort of thing. But there's so many different things. Even if it looks like on the surface that you've got a really bad, unlucky sort of situation, it's quite often that you can turn it around.
Yeah. What sort of practical things do you talk about in your book where people can help make themselves more lucky?
So I think there's a bunch of different things, and they could fall under a bunch of different sort of broader headings. But one set of tips that's all about appreciating what you got. Like, I think, it's a bit like with people. The more you get up in the morning and actually appreciate sometimes how lucky you are, that can be a really helpful thing for individuals. But I think it's also true for companies. Like, a lot of the time, there's amazing stuff going on right under the nose of the company, in the organization, and they just don't realize how lucky they are. Like, they maybe need someone else to come in from outside and say, wow, look at your people are incredible. That product is amazing. You need to make more of that. Or you do realize how lucky you are to have that history or that brand logo, or all sorts of other things that just get taken for granted. So there's a whole bunch of ideas just about being appreciative of what you already have. And then there's a whole bunch of ideas about looking out for ideas everywhere. Sometimes there can be opportunities in things that are not directly within your category. They might be from another category that you could steal them or borrow them, or from another part of the world that you could sort of lift and apply to your own thing. Or it could just be an idea from, like, music or fashion, or all sorts of other stuff like that that is not just about your own company and what's within it. So there's lots of different ways to do that. And then I think the third thing is just about that thing we've already touched on, where you turn misfortune into bad fortune. Sometimes the very worst luck can be the thing that turns out to be your best luck. There's often a thin line between that, and sometimes you just have to lean into a problem and just kind of say, right, I'm going to take this thing which looks like a nightmare and I'm going to turn it into a good thing.
Yeah, that reframing. I've heard you speak so well about this in the past in other interviews. Can you give us some examples that spring to mind of companies that have reframed a negative situation and flipped it and turned it into something that is, works out to be really positive?
Well, there was a great example a couple of years ago from KFC. Yeah. And if you remember, they had probably the worst thing that could possibly happen if you run a fried chicken business, which is you run out of fried chicken. And, it's the biggest fiasco ever, wasn't it? Everyone was going crazy, lots of anger, embarrassment. And rather than sort of shy away from it, they sort of pretty upfront acknowledged that it was an absolutely almighty cock-up, frankly. And they did it, though, with a bit of wit. And they created advertising which used the word FCK. So they sort of flipped their brand initials and just sort of frankly said it was a bit of a fuck up. And that suddenly, and the charming way that they then sort of went on to explain, look, this is a bit of a problem. We accept it. It's pretty dumb, but we're on it and we're going to fix it. Was just really refreshing, for a big company to do that. And suddenly, everyone started feeling much more fond of them, and they probably came out stronger than ever because we all sort of appreciated, well, that's a sort of nice human business that can have a laugh at itself. So I think that's a great example. And recently, by the way, I found out that that's not the first thing that they've turned a misfortune into good fortune. Their famous slogan, the finger licking good slogan. Yeah. Well, part of that came from, in the 1950s, they'd done an ad, and somebody in the background of this telly ad was licking their fingers in the restaurant. And they got a lot of complaints. A lot of people said, that's disgusting, can't believe you did that. And so rather than sort of, hide or be embarrassed about it, they actually, again, embraced it and sort of said, yeah, well, the reason that people are licking the fingers is because they're finger licking good. Yeah. And that slogan came out of that. So it was a great way of taking something that could have been a real sort of yucky thing and turning it into a really positive message. And, they've run with that slogan now for God knows how many decades.
Yeah, amazing. Within your network and on a daily basis, you work with, some of the world's most talented people and some of the most successful people. What traits do you most commonly recognise in the luckiest people that you've met?
Oh, that's a good question. I think optimism's one. Not blind optimism, because obviously, especially at the moment, we've got to be, accepting of the fact there's a lot of bad stuff going on in the world and a lot of difficult stuff. So you can't be naive. But generally, you've got to have a positive view. I think that's what most entrepreneurs will tell you, that you've got to get up out of bed in the morning, and even if things are tough, you've got to sort of find a way to keep yourself positive. And I think that's, strongly associated with luck as well. That sometimes luck is just about having your eyes open to opportunities. And if you've got a positive mindset, you might recognize the same situation and think, oh, actually, that could be an opportunity for me there. Whereas sometimes if you've got a more negative mindset by nature, you might see the very same opportunity, but it might look too much trouble or a difficult thing, or, you could interpret it in a very different way. And that often makes the difference between success and failure, I would say.
Yeah, sure. We live in a world where people are promoting themselves or their business online every day via social media. What factors should people consider with the aim of having the biggest impact before pressing the send button?
Oh, wow. So what should they consider before pressing the send button? I guess it's the impact on others. I know that sort of perhaps sort of sounds like stating the obvious, but I think one of the unfortunate things about social media is obviously it's quite easy for you to ping off a tweet, or similar, which can sort of it might achieve your immediate aim of getting lots of attention, but it might also annoy or upset lots of people as well. So, and I don't agree. There's that old adage that all publicity is good publicity. It's not. Believe me. If you say something, really hurtful or outrageous, and get 5 seconds worth of fame out of it, but end up losing loads of fans or customers or whatever, then that's not a worthwhile sort of thing to do. So, I guess it's just sort of understanding what people on the receiving end might think of it.
Yeah, sure. In the world of internet marketing, luck plays a massive part. You could release the same video on YouTube on 2 different days, and one of them might end up getting 1,000 views, and the same video might end up getting tens of millions of views. What are the key ingredients in making a campaign go viral, and how do you become lucky in doing that?
That is a good question. Do you know what? I'll tell you the surefire way not to have a viral success is to set out to try and have a viral success. Every time that ever somebody sort of said, "Can you make this go viral?" it hasn't, because for some reason it plays on your mind and you're trying to do something that's not really a proper objective. So it's almost like you just need to do a really good job and then hope. And some luck does come into it, but I guess the things that tend to go really viral are they're things that have an extremely emotional sort of effect. Like something that is either very funny. That is, what do we share with people, isn't it? So we probably share really, really, really funny stuff, or the opposite, really, really outrageous, shocking stuff that makes us all cross, but we are so cross that we want to share it with other people. Or maybe very moving stuff where we feel very strongly that we care about the subject. What tends to not work is if you're obviously just very informational and flat and functional. Nobody wants to hear about you or my products.
Yeah.
particularly. And so you've got to, again, see it from other people's point of view, but why should they share your stuff on social media? And it tends to be one of those three things, if I'm honest, funny, shocking, or moving.
You mentioned at the beginning your work with Paddy Power. I know some of those campaigns were absolutely brilliant and really well received by lots of customers. Tell us about that. Tell us about that campaign and your work that you've done with Paddy Power at the beginning as well.
They were brilliant, actually, because they really understand that role of that rule that to make something go viral, which a lot of our work did. What they did was a lot of the time they were very funny, and they were often very shocking and outrageous. But it suited their brand because they're bookies, and they wanted to make it entertaining. And so the very first thing we did was a thing called Rainbow Laces, which was a campaign against homophobia in football. And it was literally a campaign on a shoestring, and that's what medium we ended up using. We ended up using rainbow-coloured bootlaces that we encouraged all the football clubs in the UK to sort of use and sort of show the support of gay footballers. And I don't know if you're into football at all, but in the end, virtually every single club got on board with it, and hundreds of different brands, and hundreds of millions of people tweeted in it. They've rainbow ified the arch of Wembley, and it's been in Coronation Street as a storyline and all the rest of it, sort of thing. So that was a brilliant thing, because it started with an idea as simple as a shoelace, it cost hardly anything, and turned out to be this massive national ongoing, I think it's been going 7 years now, campaign.
How do you guys measure the success of a campaign?
It depends what the sort of I guess the original objective was. But ultimately it needs to be sort of, I guess, a commercial effect, that it's returned a profit. And then before that, we might look at, how much noise it generates, and how, behavioral changes. Has it made more people buy it, or the same people buy it more often? There's different ways to sort of achieve those sales. Has brand image gone up? But so there's lots of different sort of things we might look at depending what sort of campaign it is. But ultimately, at some point, it's got to generate sales, and increase your profits by more than the advertising cost in the first place. But it's quite a complicated thing, because sometimes you've got to look at that over quite a long period, because most campaigns don't make money during the course of the campaign. If you're advertising cars or something like that, people that don't see a car ad and then think, all right, I'm going to go out tomorrow and buy a BMW or something like that. But over the course of many, many, many years, you're putting people in a good state of mind about that particular brand. So you have to measure it over quite a long period, quite a lot of the time. Yeah.
Is there one advertising campaign that stands out that a competitor has done that you stand back and go, I wish I thought of that?
There's loads. I mean, I'm constantly thinking, damn, I wish I'd done that. But I mean, since we're just talking about cars there, there's a lovely, the idea of Audi campaign, their very long running campaign, Vorsprung durch Technik, I think is a fantastic campaign. I think it's about 40 years old or something like that. And it came from it's an agency called BBH, who are a very good big agency. And the boss of that agency, a guy called John Hegarty, who's a bit of a legend, creative genius, was doing a bit of a tour around the factory in Germany, and he spotted some poster on a wall. This is what I mean about appreciating what you got, because it's sitting on the wall. The writing was literally on the wall for anyone to see, but only he sort of spotted it and asked, oh, what does that thing Vorsprung durch Technik mean? And they told him, oh, well, it means progress through technology. And then he had the great sense to kind of take that idea and use it as the slogan in Britain for the advertising, but without translating it, which is like an absolute crazy thought when you think about it. I mean, you would think that nobody's going to understand it, and you'd be absolutely nuts to run an ad in a foreign language. But he sort of realized that actually that made it sound more interesting, more cool. We all think the Germans have got this amazing technical expertise, so Vorsprung durch Technik sounds like really impressive. And I just think that's a brilliant piece of thinking that has proved, very successful over 40 years, and there's not a lot of campaigns can go on that long.
Yeah, amazing. What resources, books, podcasts, training courses have been most helpful in helping you grow your skill set over the years?
Well, funnily enough, and this is probably a bad thing for me to say now because I'm trying to promote my own sort of business book, but I'm going to say that a lot of the time I like stuff that's not just about business. I think a lot of the time, if you can probably do yourself a lot of favors by reading stuff about sport or music or fashion or religion or the arts or any of those other sort of things. That actually helps you in your day job with your business, because it just makes you more rounded and gives you more places that you can nick ideas from, really. Yeah. So if anything, I've probably benefited from stuff like that, and watching a lot of mainstream telly and things like that, because in my line of work, it's important that we are in tune with the sort of things that the vast majority of people are watching and doing, and it's quite easy for us to live in a little bubble, somewhere in Soho, where we just care about advertising sort of stuff, and that's not the way. So my actual advice would be to not get, as I say, this is probably bad news for someone who's trying to promote a business book, but it's, apart from this one, make the exception for Go Luck Yourself, but for everyone else's books, just have a look at other stuff in other sectors, because that will give you a more sort of eclectic sort of range of influence.
Brilliant. Andy, I've loved talking to you. The last half an hour has absolutely flown by. Do you have any closing thoughts? And also, how can people follow you on your journey?
Well, people can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Andy Nairn. And actually, the final thing I'd like to say is that all the royalties for the book are going to a charity or an organisation called Commercial Break, who help working class kids get a lucky break into the industry. So I think that's something I'm really passionate about. It's quite, obviously it's tough for everybody right now, but it's particularly tough if you're trying to get in the front door into the media industries, and often a lot of people from that background find it even tougher still. So I like the idea of writing a book about luck that might bring a bit of luck to other people too. So if you can support causes like that, and one of them might be to buy the book, then that'd be lovely too.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, we're going to put the link to your book and your Twitter account and your website in the description below. Andy, thanks again for your time. I've really enjoyed it.
No, I've really enjoyed it too. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.